Hi children, I'm Naveed sir. Today we are going to learn market equilibrium. So market equilibrium is all about the consumers and the suppliers. With the knowledge you all have about demand and supply, right, we can enter market equilibrium easily. Now, when it comes to market equilibrium, as you all know, price will be on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis. You all know, right? As consumers, what do? We demand. So this is the demand curve. We know when the price is high, right, the quantity will be less. And when the price goes down, the quantity increases, which we call it as the inverse relationship. That means the negative relationship between the price and the quantity demanded. When the price goes down, the quantity demand rises. We know that, no? Just think it practically. When you go to a shop, right, you will always plan to consume a particular product at a very low price. When the price is really high, you will not go and buy that particular product. You will call it off and you will look into other goods as well. So we know these things in demand. And again, demand is for consumers. And to demand, we need products. We need producers who supplies them to the market. So here comes the suppliers. Now when we talk about the suppliers, right, we have to think ourselves as suppliers. Supply is all about producers. So soon after we talked about demand, we talk about supply. We talked about that, right? Producers, they will always plan to produce and supply a particular product more at a very high price. When the price rises, the supply rises as well, right? The price rises, the supply rises. That is the law of supply. When the price increases, the suppliers are motivated to supply more. The quantity supply increases as well. That's the proportionate relationship between the quantity supplied and the price. There is an inverse relationship between the quantity demanded and the price, a negative relationship. Supply has a positive relationship. Now, both of them are in a market. They meet together, they intercept together. You all agree. As a consumer, you all should agree for the price, for a certain price, right? The relationship, right, between the consumers and the suppliers it will be really friendly if both of you all agree at a certain price and quantity. So it's assumed both of them, they intercept here, right? This is the agreed price. No more bargains. Everything is cleared. It is known as the market clearing price as well. That's what we call the equilibrium price. The equilibrium price. And the quantity which is being agreed, right? Totally it will be sold out inside this market, right? This is what we call the equilibrium quantity. The equilibrium quantity. Simple as that, right? Nothing to forget, just small things to remember. We talked about demand first. We talked about shifts in demand, and after that we entered supply. We talked about producers. We talked about their determinants. Then now we have entered market equilibrium, where both of them meet at a certain place. They agree for a certain price, which is known as the equilibrium price, and they agree for a certain quantity. which is known as the equilibrium quantity, right? So above the equilibrium price, right, suppliers are motivated to supply more and consumers are being demotivated. They will reduce their demand. That's the law of demand. When the price increases, the quantity demanded reduces. When the price reduces, the quantity demand increases. Law of demand. Law of supply, a proportionate relationship. When the price increases, the supply increases, right? So let's assume the equilibrium price is cancelled, right? And a new price is being set by the government. Let's assume, yes, government, they are the one who has the authority to impose higher prices or lower prices, to abort prices. Now the government has imposed a price of rupees 25. What happens? Straight away the consumers will reduce the demand. They will reduce the demand and producers, they will supply more. When a price is charged above the equilibrium, the supply increases while the demand reduces, right? You can see at rupees 25 they supply more, but at rupees 25 the demand is less at rupees 100, at 100 quantities. 175 units are being supplied by the producers. Why is that? What's the reason why? Suppliers, right? A main determinant of supply is cost of production. You all know that. Cost of production, technology, taxes, subsidies. We talked about that in the previous assignment. So when the cost of production remains constant while the price of the particular good increases, that means producers are motivated to supply more. Why? I'll give you a complete picture about cost of production, which is not in the textbook as well. Cost of production includes the costs for the land they have paid, the rent, salaries for their laborers, and interest on capital they have obtained, and then comes the profit of the particular producer, entrepreneur. So let's assume at rupees 20, right, this particular product, the rent is 5, salary is 5, interest 5, profit rupees 5, it makes 20, right? Entrepreneur's profit is being covered inside this 20. Now the price increases up to 25 while these things remains constant at 5. This doesn't change, we didn't talk about those things. What happens is the particular rupees 25, the extra rupee 5 will be added on the entrepreneur's profit. That makes the price equals to 25. Right? That's why they are motivated to increase their supply more, right? And on the other hand, consumers will reduce their quantity demand. So what happens when the quantity supply exceeds quantity demand? Quantity supply exceeds quantity demand. We call it as excess supply. So keep this in your mind. Above the equilibrium at a higher price, producers are motivated to sell more while consumers will reduce their demand. That means the supplied quantity exceeds the demanded quantity and excess supply occurs. Let's talk about the opposite scenario. Now the government aborts the equilibrium price and they reduce the price to give a concession for the consumers. Automatically, as we talked, according to the law of demand, lower the price, higher the demand, higher the price, lower the demand. Now when the price lowers, automatically, let's assume it's 10, it's rupees 10, consumers are demanding more. Now, as we talked, when the price goes down, straight away it will reflect on their profit. There won't be profit when it is 10. they will reduce the supply in a very big level of quantity. Automatically, quantity supplied will be less than the quantity demand. So this is the area we call it as excess demand. Why? Your demand exceeds the supply. When the demand exceeds the supply, we call it as excess demand. Now we faced an excess supply situation due to this isolation and lockdown situation in our country, Sri Lanka, right? We had cheap goods, right? Some certain products, but some agricultural products was really expensive for us, so we demanded less during that time. But suppliers, they were motivated, they sold more, they just released the goods to those so-called isolated areas, but the demand was less. I faced an excess supply situation. I saw it. So that's why I applied that theory to you all, because you all have, most of the students, right, have faced and still facing this situation, right? Hopefully we talked about excess demand, we talked about excess supply, we have a good insight about the costs of production, right? The land's cost is rent, the laborer's cost is salaries, the capital's cost is interest, and the entrepreneur's cost is known as profit, right? So this is excess demand and excess supply. There is a question, a good analytical question, you all have to answer it in the assignment. And we talked about the equilibrium, and next we are going to talk about the shifts in demand and supply. As we told, we are going to talk about the shifts in demand and shifts in supply and shifts in both demand and supply at the same time. First, let's talk about the shifts in demand. We know the demand determinants. Right? A shift in demand occurs while the price of a particular good remains constant, while the other factors tend to change. What are the other factors? You all know that. A particular goods demand depends on price of the good. When you go to buy a good, first of all, you will look into the price of that particular good. Second, the price of other goods. There are two other goods, which is known as price of substitutes and prices of complementaries. Prices of complements, and then we'll look into the consumer income. You all know this. That's why I am speeding a bit. Right? Let's just take these three. We have more geographical factors and other factors, the gender, consumer income, and fashion and taste. Right? These are the determinants. These are the demand determinants. Now, in a market, let's assume the price of the good remains constant. The price of substitutes has increased. Let's assume this is Coca-Cola, the demand for Coca-Cola, the supply for Coca-Cola. Substitute, the price of Pepsi has been increased. Automatically what happens? Consumers who are consuming Pepsi, they still know the price of Coca-Cola is constant. Let's move to consume Coca-Cola. Let's move. What happens? Automatically, this particular product's demand increases. So when the demand increases while the price of the particular good remains constant, right, the demand curve shifts to the right. What's the reason we talked? We talked about the price of the substitute. Let's assume this is Coca-Cola, and the price of Pepsi substitutes has increased. Consumers who were consuming Pepsi, straight away they moved towards consuming Coca-Cola. That's how the quantity, the entire demand of Coca-Cola tend to increase. So it could go the other way as well. When the price of Pepsi is reduced, people who have consumed this Coca-Cola, particular good, they will move there. Automatically there will be a reduction in demand for Coca-Cola. Be a reduction in demand for Coca-Cola. Right? This is how, right, the demand curve shifts. The demand curve shifts. Right? So when the demand curve shifts, to the right, when the demand increases to the right, while the supply remains constant. Now look, this is the supply, it is constant. This is nothing to do with the suppliers. Let's talk about the increment in demand. Right? What happens, we'll see. Simply, let's see, when demand, let's forget about reduction. I just gave you an idea about the reduction. Right? When the demand increases while the supply remains constant, we will have a new interception point. A new interception point. A new interception point. The new interception point shows what? An increment in the price and an increment in the quantity as well. So keep this in your mind. When the demand increases while the supply remains constant, the price of the good will increase and the quantity will also increase. The market will respond to this. So the opposite, right? What you have to do is, you all have to answer the question, you all have to show me the shifts, a leftward shift of the demand curve, and you all have to explain it. And now we are going to move towards the shifts in supply. An increment and reduction in supply. Right, now we talked about fashion and taste, price of complements. Yes, complementary goods are the goods which we use with the particular good. Right, it's like car and petrol. If the particular good is car, we have to consume, we have to use petrol with it. So when the price of petrol goes up, the demand for cars goes down. That's also another demand determinant. Right, now again let's move to shifts in supply. Shifts in supply. Let's take the same price which we took earlier, $100, let's assume, and quantity in units. The product might differ according to the example we take. Now, demand remains constant, a shift in supply. We know, right? We know the supply determinants. Again, when a producer supplies a particular good, right, he will look into the price of the good. Look into the price of the good. Second one, talked about cost of production earlier. Talked about cost of production, right? And technology. If they use an outdated technology, that means you fail to supply more, right? Then comes taxes imposed by the government, then grants, subsidies. Subsidies are being given to motivate the farmers. It's a grant given by the government. Taxes to demotivate the production, right? Price of the good remains constant. What happens? Cost of production increases or reduces. Cost of production, let's assume, reduces. We know the cost of production, right? Rent, salaries, interest. Then comes the profit. Let's assume while everything remains constant, the rent of the particular firm, the building, has increased, has reduced, right? Rent has been reduced. What happens when the rent reduces while the price of the particular good remains constant? The suppliers are being motivated to supply more. They will supply more because they are paying a very less rent than before. They are motivated to supply more. Automatically, what happens? The supply curve shifts to the right. An increment in supply will will shift the supply curve to the right. Again, we will be having a new interception point. A new interception point. Now, what happens? Rent reduces, cost of production reduces while the price remains constant. The entire supply shifts to the right because suppliers are motivated to supply more. When with the rightward shift of the supply curve, automatically the price of the particular good reduces while the quantity of the particular good increases. So when cost of production, rent, salaries, interest reduces, it will increase the profit in other ways. That's why he is motivated to increase the supply. Supply will increase. Technology, if you are using a good technology, not an outdated technology, you can produce more. The good technology, supply will increase. Subsidies, when the government has called off the taxes, right, cut off the taxes, you are motivated because you are not paying taxes, you don't have to pay it anymore. And if the government gives you a grant, right, a financial scheme, then you are motivated again, you will produce more. These are the reasons for an increment in supply. And you all have work to do. Just write me reasons for reduction in supply. Show me the reduction in supply. Show me the reduction in supply. I want the curves to be drawn and I just want the explanations. What happens to the price and what happens to the quantity. That's the work you all have to do. We talked about the market equilibrium, we talked about consumers, we talked about suppliers, talked about the market equilibrium price and quantity. Then again, talked about shifts in demand, shifts in supply, excess demand, excess supply. So you all have work to do, right? Read the book and look into this very carefully. I want the curves to be drawn. So guys, I'm calling this off. We have finished market equilibrium. It's time for me to sign off. God bless you all, children.